The soft hush of leaves moving in the morning breeze, the slow curl of steam rising from a warm cup of tea, and the pale light of dawn breaking through the curtains. These are the images that carry us gently into the world of Edgar Cayce. He lived in a time when the quick pill and the instant injection were not so readily at hand, and even if they were, Cayce's eyes always seemed to look beyond the surface, seeking the deeper rhythm of the body and the soul. He often reminded those who came to him that pain was not their enemy. Instead, it was like a messenger, a sacred courier carrying a letter from within, telling them that something had shifted out of harmony. Imagine a man arriving at Cayce's door, his back so stiff that he could barely bend, his nights broken by waves of discomfort. He had tried ointments, bandages, and even the harsh tinctures of the time, yet still the pain clung to him. Cayce would not simply note down the symptom. He would close his eyes, enter that curious sleeping trance, and return with words that surprised the patient. The pain is but the cry of imbalance. Do not silence the cry. Listen to it. It shows you where to restore harmony. To Cayce, every ache was an invitation. Instead of pushing it aside, he wanted us to lean closer, to ask what part of our life, be it diet, emotion, or habit, had gone out of alignment. Pain, he said, was like the alarm bell that wakes us before the fire spreads. It was not cruel, but protective. If we could embrace it as a guide, the path to healing would open. He often compared pain to the tight knot in a rope. You can pull against it with all your strength, but the knot only digs in deeper. Or you can bring warmth, patience, and gentle attention, and slowly the fibers begin to loosen. Cayce urged his patients to approach their pain in this second way, with calm observation, with respect for the body's signals, and with faith that relief would follow balance. There is something profoundly comforting in this view. Instead of fearing the ache in the knee or resenting the stubborn stiffness in the neck, one begins to ask, what is this trying to teach me? Where have I lived out of rhythm? In this way, the pain becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant, and the human being, instead of feeling helpless, discovers a partnership with their own body. Cayce also believed that modern life, yes, even in his early 20th century, pulled people too far from nature. He said that when people lived closer to the soil, closer to the rhythms of planting and harvest, the body naturally kept its balance. But as people drifted into cities, ate more preserved foods, and shouldered more emotional burdens, the signals of imbalance grew sharper. Pain, in his words, was the body's plea for a return to natural order. Consider the story of a woman who suffered from relentless headaches. Doctors of her time could offer little beyond tonics laced with alcohol or narcotics. Cayce, however, told her to think of the headaches not as random misfortune, but as her body pointing toward deeper causes. Circulation blocked, diet heavy with fried foods, emotions held in tight silence. He guided her to gentle adjustments, lighter meals rich in vegetables, daily walks to stir the blood, castor oil packs to soften the tension across her temples. Within weeks, the headaches eased, but more importantly, she felt she had learned to read her own body's language. This perspective can feel radical even now. We live in a culture that wants to mute pain instantly, to smother it under pills and patches. Cayce invites us to pause instead, to place a warm hand over the ache and whisper inwardly, "I hear you." This small act alone, he believed, began to shift the body's chemistry, softening the resistance that often makes pain grow sharper. He also insisted that the mind and the body could not be separated in the healing process. When someone lived under constant worry or resentment, the body mirrored those tensions, often in the form of physical discomfort. Pain, then, was not always born of injury alone. It could be the voice of the heart, unspoken grief turned into aching shoulders, or long frustration lodged in the lower back. He urged his patients to forgive, to release, to lighten their thoughts, for these were as vital to relief as any poultice or compress. When one listens in this way, even the harshest pains begin to reveal their story. Arthritis, for example, was described by Cayce as the crystallization of attitudes as much as of minerals. He asked patients to see whether rigidity of spirit was accompanying rigidity of joints. In releasing bitterness, some found their bodies loosened as well. This is not to say Cayce dismissed the reality of suffering. He had deep compassion for the sleepless nights and the weary days, but he wanted those who suffered to know they were not powerless. There were ways, simple, natural, gentle ways, to ease the ache while tending the true causes. Warm herbs, soothing oils, skilled hands, cleansing baths, and balanced foods, all of these would enter his recommendations. Each was meant not to fight pain, but to invite the body back into flow. As we begin this journey through Cayce's teachings, let us hold this first lesson close. Pain is the body's message, not its curse. It is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of hope. When we learn to hear it with patience, doors open to healing that is deeper, lasting, and kind. And as the morning light stretches across the room of our imagination, Cayce's words gently prepare us for the first of these natural pathways. The warm, fragrant embrace of herbal poultices, where pain begins to melt like frost under the sun. There is something timeless about the smell of herbs warmed by gentle heat, their fragrance lifting into the air like a quiet hymn to the earth. For Edgar Cayce, these were not merely kitchen staples or forgotten remedies of grandmothers. They were nature's own ministers of comfort, waiting to serve when pain visited the body. He often guided those who came to him toward the simple act of applying herbs in warmth against the skin, because he knew that heat carried the power to open, to loosen, to release. And when combined with the living essence of plants, that warmth became a balm that reached deep into the hidden knots of discomfort. Imagine a farmer who had spent decades bending in the fields, his joints swollen, his knees stiffened to the point where each step felt like a test of endurance. When Cayce entered his trance and spoke of the man's condition, his words were not about drugs or harsh interventions. He said instead, "Let the warmth of herbs be laid upon the swollen places. Let the body remember the gentleness of the earth." A poultice of warm comfrey and mullein was prepared, wrapped in clean cloth, and laid gently over the aching knees. The man described the sensation as if the pain, so sharp and unyielding before, began to soften under the touch of those leaves, as though the plants themselves whispered, "We are here to help." Cayce often pointed to herbs with qualities that mirrored the needs of the body. Comfrey, with its reputation as bone knit, seemed to recall the body's natural urge to restore what was worn or broken. Mullein, tall and sturdy in the field, lent its strength to weakened tissues. Ginger, with its fire, stirred the blood and melted the chill of stagnation. Mustard seeds, when warmed, drew out the hidden heaviness and brought circulation to the surface. Each plant carried a story, and Cayce taught that when we applied them with respect, their story mingled with our own. The ritual of a warm herbal poultice was more than medicine. It was an act of slowing down, of making space for the body's voice. One would boil water, steep the chosen herbs until the room filled with their aroma, then fold them into soft cloth. The poultice, warm to the touch, was pressed against the sore place. Heat penetrated the skin, pores opened, and the essence of the plant seeped inward. Patients often described a tingling, a loosening, even a sense of being held by something greater than themselves. There was a story of a seamstress who suffered from constant cramps in her wrists and fingers, the result of long hours bent over her work. Doctors spoke of fatigue and recommended rest, but her livelihood depended on her hands. Cayce told her to use warm flaxseed poultices applied in the evenings. After weeks of doing so, she reported that not only had the cramps eased, but her sleep had deepened, as though the pain had taken with it the restlessness that haunted her nights. She said, "It was as if the herbs drew away not just the ache, but the worry wound tight inside me." Cayce always emphasized that the body was not separate from the mind. When someone prepared a poultice, he advised them to do so with intention, to breathe calmly, and to hold a thought of relief while applying it. He often said, "As you think, so you open the channels of healing." Thus, a poultice became not only a physical application, but a prayer made tangible, an offering of warmth both to the body and the soul. The beauty of these methods lay in their simplicity. One did not need wealth, nor the latest machinery of science to benefit. A handful of herbs, a bowl of hot water, and a quiet place to rest were often enough. And in that simplicity, patients discovered something profound, that healing could begin in their own hands, not only in the hands of others. There was also the story of a child who suffered severe earaches, nights broken by tears and fever. Cayce's reading recommended a poultice of roasted onions placed warm over the ear, wrapped with soft cloth. The parents followed the instructions, and soon the child quieted, the pain easing into sleep. The mother later wrote, "I thought it was only an old wives' tale, but that night I felt as though the earth itself had cradled my child." These examples show us that Cayce did not view herbs as superstition. He saw them as living instruments tuned to the needs of the human body, especially when guided by warmth. He taught that just as the sun warms the soil to release the seed, so heat upon herbs releases their virtues to enter us. This union of plant and heat, body and spirit, formed a triad of healing more lasting than temporary suppression of symptoms. It is easy to dismiss such practices in a world filled with quick solutions, but perhaps that dismissal is part of why pain continues to haunt so many. Cayce's wisdom reminds us that sometimes the very earth beneath our feet already holds the answer. When a person sits quietly, herbs steeping beside them, the air fragrant with their oils, they are reconnecting to rhythms older than memory. And in that reconnection, the body often remembers how to ease itself. At the close of each session, Cayce would gently instruct patients not to think of the poultice as a cure-all, but as a partner. It could soften, loosen, relieve, but the deeper work of balance, through diet, through emotion, through prayer, must walk beside it. Pain was never just physical. It was the sum of life's imbalances. Herbs offered a key, but the lock was always the whole being. As the poultice cools, the body feels lighter, and the once sharp ache now seems like a fading echo. This is the moment when the patient begins to believe in the possibility of relief without force. From here, Cayce would often suggest another remedy, an oil both humble and profound, that could penetrate deeper still, the soothing, almost mystical comfort of castor oil packs. Among the many natural remedies Edgar Cayce spoke of, few carry as much gentle power as the castor oil compress. Simple in appearance, humble in its origin, yet profound in its effects, This method became one of his most trusted recommendations for easing pain and restoring balance. To Cayce, castor oil was not merely a substance pressed from seeds. It was a vehicle for life's flow, a balm that could seep through stiffness and awaken circulation where it had grown stagnant. Picture a woman tormented by unrelenting abdominal pain. Doctors had told her it was a condition she would learn to endure, prescribing little more than rest and diluted tonics. When she sought Cayce's guidance, his words in trance were clear. Apply the oil of castor in warmth. Let it draw the congested humors, let it soothe the walls within, and the channels will find their natural rhythm again. The woman, skeptical at first, prepared the compress as instructed. Flannel cloth soaked in thick golden oil, gently warmed, then laid across her abdomen. She covered it with dry cloths and a hot water bottle for steady heat. Within nights, she felt not only comfort, but also a surprising lightness, as if her body had sighed with relief. Weeks later, her pain had diminished so greatly that she wrote Cayce in gratitude, calling the castor oil pack a friend I never knew I had. Cayce often explained that pain persisted where circulation was poor, where toxins gathered like still waters in a forgotten pond. Castor oil, he said, had the mysterious ability to stir those waters without violence, coaxing them back into motion. It was not a hammer against pain, but a current that gently carried waste out and allowed healing forces to flow in. Patients reported that the compresses softened hardened places, relieved swelling, and calmed spasms in ways no harsh medicine had achieved. One man suffering from persistent knee pain after an old injury found himself unable to climb stairs without wincing. Cayce recommended nightly castor oil packs. After 3 weeks, the man described feeling as though the joint had been washed clean from the inside. The swelling reduced, the stiffness eased, and with it came a newfound trust in his body. He said he no longer feared the climb, he welcomed it. What made castor oil so special, in Cayce's view, was not only its physical action, but also its symbolic one. He taught that oil represents light, nourishment, and continuity. To anoint the body with oil was to remind the flesh of its connection to the divine spark. Castor oil, so thick and enduring, became for him a sacred fluid that bridged the earthly and the spiritual. Applying it in warmth was an act of devotion to the body, a recognition that healing begins when we tend to ourselves with reverence. The ritual itself was important. Patients were told to set aside a quiet hour, free from distraction, to apply the compress. The cloth, once soaked and warmed, was folded onto the troubled area. Over it came another cloth to seal in the heat, then gentle warmth from a heating pad or hot water bottle. During this time, Cayce encouraged rest, prayer, or meditation. He believed that the mind's calm, paired with the oil's action, created conditions for the body to shift from turmoil to restoration. There was even a case of a soldier returning from war, plagued by digestive pain and emotional strain. Cayce recommended castor oil packs, along with gentle dietary adjustments. The man wrote later that the compresses became more than treatment. They became his ritual of peace. Each evening, as the oil warmed against his abdomen, he felt his breath slow, his thoughts quiet, and his grief loosen its grip. Healing touched not only his body, but also the hidden wounds of his spirit. Skeptics, both then and now, questioned how something so simple could bring such results. Cayce answered this with humility. It is not the force of the oil alone, but the law of life which it serves. When applied with faith, it awakens what is already within. He saw the body as wise, always striving for balance, always seeking to mend. The castor oil pack did not impose healing, it invited it. Over time, countless individuals discovered relief in this practice. Women with menstrual cramps, men with aching backs, elders with stiffened shoulders, all spoke of how the oil seemed to seep past barriers that nothing else could touch. Some said the warmth lulled them into the deepest sleep they had known in years. Others described a feeling of being unlocked, as if long-closed doors in the body had gently swung open. To witness this is to realize that healing need not be complicated. A bottle of castor oil, a soft cloth, a bit of heat. These can be the instruments of profound change. Cayce's wisdom shines here in its simplicity. To treat pain not by force but by flow, not by silencing but by listening and coaxing. And when the compress is lifted, when the skin glistens with the oil's golden sheen, many have said they felt not only relief but a quiet gratitude, as though the body itself whispered thanks for being honored in this way. Thus, the castor oil pack stands as one of Cayce's most enduring gifts, a symbol of natural healing that bridges body and soul. It shows us that in warmth and patience lies the key to releasing what binds us. And as we leave this chapter of oil and flow, Cayce's path leads us next to another of his cherished practices, the healing touch of human hands, where massage becomes not merely comfort, but a sacred dialogue with pain itself. There are moments when the body longs not only for warmth or rest, but for the living touch of another human being. Edgar Cayce often spoke of massage as more than a luxury, more than the indulgence of a weary traveler at an inn. For him, it was an act of restoration, a way of awakening the flow of life through muscles that had grown rigid, joints that had stiffened, or nerves that had been clouded by strain. He described pain as often being the cry of circulation denied, and massage as one of the simplest ways to bring that circulation back to life. Imagine a man bent low with pain after years of hard labor, his shoulders knotted like cords pulled too tight. Cayce, when asked in trance how to ease the man's suffering, did not speak of injections or heavy medicines. Instead, he instructed, "Let the body be massaged with warm oils, beginning at the spine. Work slowly, evenly, that the blood may be stirred and the nerves soothed. In this, the strength will return." The patient followed, and after weeks of steady therapy, his stiffness yielded to freedom, his breath no longer caught with each movement. He said afterward, "It was as if my own body had been given back to me." Cayce understood that the body, when touched with care, begins to remember. Just as water flows more freely when stones are shifted in a stream, so too does blood flow when the knots of tension are eased by hand. He often advised oils infused with herbs or simple olive oil, warmed slightly before use, for he believed that the medium carried as much significance as the act itself. The oil nourished the skin, but also symbolized the sacred exchange between healer and one in need. There was a case of a woman who suffered severe neuralgia, with pain searing through her face and neck. Medical men of her day could offer little beyond sedatives. Cayce's reading advised gentle massage with peanut oil, working slowly along the cervical spine and into the jawline. At first, the woman could hardly bear to be touched, but with persistence and tenderness, the sessions began to loosen the deep grip of pain. She reported that over time, not only did her neuralgia subside, but she felt an unexplainable peace, as though the touch itself had reminded her spirit that she was cared for. Massage, to Cayce, was never mechanical. It was not simply rubbing muscles. It was communion with the living temple of the body. He urged practitioners to work with intention, even prayer, so that their touch carried not only physical skill, but also compassion. He said, "As ye think and feel while ministering, so shall the vibrations enter into the body of the one you touch." In this way, massage became an exchange of energies, a quiet conversation in which the healer's calm became the patient's calm. The healer's faith became the patient's faith. This belief was not foreign to those who received it. Many wrote that during massage they felt not only pain diminish, but also burdens of worry and sadness ease away. Some said tears came unbidden, followed by laughter, as though long-held emotions hidden in the tissues had finally found release. Cayce anticipated this, teaching that pain is not only physical tension, but also the body's way of storing emotions unexpressed. A careful hand, guided with respect, could unlock not only knots of muscle, but knots of the heart. Even the act of massaging the spine carried significance. Cayce described the spine as the tree of life within the body, through which flowed the electrical currents of the nervous system. By gently working along its length, one could awaken sluggish channels and restore harmony between the organs they fed. A stiffened back was never just a stiff back in Cayce's language. It was a sign that communication between body and spirit had grown weak, and massage was one way of restoring that dialogue. There was the story of a teacher, plagued by migraines so severe, she often had to leave her classroom mid-lesson. Cayce suggested that her head was not the source, but her spine and circulation were. Regular massage with olive oil down her back, he said, would bring relief. Within months, the headaches faded into memory. She later remarked that it was not only her health that returned, but her joy in teaching. I had forgotten how light life could feel until the pain was gone, she said. In all of this, Cayce never asked patients to see massage as a miracle cure. He reminded them that it was one thread in a tapestry of healing, best when woven with good diet, emotional release, and other natural remedies. Yet he believed firmly that the laying on of hands, when done with patience and love, was a powerful doorway to relief. Pain could not cling so tightly when circulation flowed, when nerves calmed, when the spirit was reminded of gentleness. Massage, then, was more than technique. It was a reminder that healing is relational, that no one is meant to walk through pain alone. To be touched with kindness, to be cared for, to be treated as a whole being, these were as vital to Cayce's remedies as any herb or oil. And so, as the hands of a healer work slowly along weary muscles, as the body sighs with each release, we are prepared to step into another form of Cayce's wisdom. If massage was the art of touch, the next remedy was the art of immersion. Mineral baths that carried the cleansing strength of earth and water together, washing away the weight of pain like waves against a tired shore. Water has always carried the memory of healing. In every culture, from the sacred rivers of the East to the mineral springs of Europe, people have sought the embrace of water to wash away pain and restore the spirit. Edgar Cayce, with his gaze turned both inward and beyond, often pointed his patients toward this ancient medicine. He spoke of mineral baths not as indulgence, but as necessity for bodies burdened with pain and toxins. To immerse oneself in water charged with salts was, in his view, to let the body surrender its heaviness into the larger currents of nature. He told of a man plagued by arthritic pain so fierce that his hands had curled inward, his joints like stubborn knots that refused to yield. In trance, Cayce advised, "Let the body soak in mineral salts, that the channels of elimination may be opened. Thus will the poisons be drawn outward. Thus will relief come." The man, skeptical yet desperate, prepared a bath of warm water stirred with Epsom salts. He lowered himself slowly into its embrace, and as he did, he felt a tingling in his limbs, a lightness he had not known in years. With steady use, his hands loosened, his grip returned, and he declared that the bath had become his sanctuary of ease. To Cayce, mineral baths were more than physical therapy. He believed that the skin, our largest organ, was not merely a barrier but a gateway. Through its pores, the body breathed and released. Warmth opened those gateways, salts drew out what did not belong, and water carried it away. Pain, which often clung when toxins lingered, softened as the body's burden lightened. He described it as giving the body back its avenues of cleansing. Consider a woman who suffered long from swollen ankles and aching calves. Doctors called it poor circulation and offered compresses. Cayce instead instructed her to soak her legs in a basin of hot water with dissolved sea salt, followed by a gentle massage upward toward the heart. Within weeks, the swelling diminished. More importantly, she said, the heaviness that pressed on me each night lifted. I felt as though my legs belonged to me again. There was also the story of a miner, his back twisted from years underground, whose muscles carried not only strain, but also residue of dust and fatigue. Cayce urged him to take weekly baths with baking soda and salt, resting quietly afterward as if in meditation. The miner reported that the baths did more than soothe his back. They seemed to cleanse the weariness from his very bones. He spoke of sleeping deeply on those nights, waking refreshed, as though his spirit had also been bathed. What made these remedies powerful was not only the chemistry of salts, though modern science confirms their role in reducing inflammation and improving circulation. It was also the ritual, the setting aside of time, the surrender into water, the sense of being cradled. Cayce encouraged patients to think of the bath as an act of renewal, a symbolic washing away of old burdens. As the body rests in the water, he once said, let the mind also release its cares, that healing may be whole. This union of body and spirit often surprised those who practiced it. Many wrote that after their mineral soaks, they felt calmer, less anxious, as though their thoughts had been rinsed alongside their flesh. Pain did not vanish entirely in a single bath, but it loosened, and with it loosened the fear and frustration that often made pain sharper. It is striking how Cayce's remedies always seem to weave the natural elements, earth, water, fire, air, into healing. In mineral baths, earth gave its salts, water carried them, fire warmed them, and air, through breath, joined the ritual. The whole of nature participated. And in that wholeness, the human body remembered its own place in the larger order. The act of rising from the bath also carried meaning. Patients often described feeling lighter, as if the water had taken something with it. Cayce advised resting afterward, wrapped warmly, letting the body integrate what had been released. It was in these moments of stillness that many felt a profound sense of peace, sometimes deeper than the relief of pain itself. Of course, he did not offer baths as a cure-all. He reminded his patients that pain was a messenger, and baths were one of many ways to answer its call. The true healing lay in restoring balance, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Yet mineral baths stood as one of his gentlest, most accessible invitations into that balance. Even now, one can imagine the scene. A quiet room, steam rising, crystals of salt dissolving in warm water, the body sinking slowly into its depths. Muscles unwind, joints sigh, the mind releases its grip. In that sanctuary, one feels both ancient and renewed, as though the waters themselves remember every soul who ever sought their comfort. And from this immersion, Cayce's teachings lead us onward. For healing is not only what we apply from without, but also what we place within. The foods we choose each day can fan the fire of pain or soothe it into calm. To Cayce, diet was as central to relief as any poultice or bath. And so we turn now from water's embrace to the wisdom of the table, where meals become medicine and balance begins with each bite. At the heart of Edgar Cayce's readings lies a message as old as life itself. What we place into our bodies becomes the foundation of our health, our strength, and even our pain. Again and again, he reminded those who sought his counsel that diet was not merely fuel but medicine, and when chosen wisely, it could ease the burdens of inflammation, restore balance, and calm the signals of discomfort. Pain in his eyes often arose when the inner rivers of digestion and circulation became clogged or burdened by foods that inflamed rather than nourished. And so the table itself became a place of healing. Cayce believed that many chronic pains, stiff joints, aching backs, recurring headaches, were not isolated mysteries, but echoes of imbalance that began with what one ate daily. He often spoke of inflammation as a silent fire smoldering inside the body. Some foods, he warned, fanned that fire into stronger flames, while others cooled and soothed it. Patients who came to him in despair often found his first instructions surprisingly simple. Lighten the meals, balance the acids and alkalines, favor foods that cleanse rather than clog. Take, for instance, a man crippled with gout. His feet were swollen and tender, every step a trial. Cayce's reading did not recommend stronger painkillers. Instead, it urged him to remove heavy meats, fried foods, and stimulants from his diet, and to bring in green leafy vegetables, citrus fruits in moderation, and plenty of water. Within months, the man's condition shifted dramatically. The swelling reduced, the fiery pain cooled, and he walked with ease. He later said it was as if his body had been speaking all along, but only when he changed his food did he finally understand its language. Cayce often stressed the importance of raw vegetables, particularly leafy greens and salads, dressed lightly with olive oil and lemon. These, he explained, provided the body with life elements that harmonized the circulation and soothed irritation. He also recommended avoiding excessive starches and sugars, which he believed fermented in the gut, producing acids that aggravated joints and nerves. Balance was always his key, never extreme diets, but meals aligned with the body's rhythms. There was the case of a woman who suffered from persistent back pain and fatigue. Medical tests found little explanation, yet her suffering was real. Cayce's reading pointed to her liver and digestion, urging her to eat less fried food and more fresh fruits and vegetables, along with plenty of pure water. She followed, though skeptical, and within weeks felt lighter, her pain gradually fading. She wrote later that she had discovered not only relief, but joy in eating foods that felt alive. Cayce also saw the act of eating as more than physical. He often said, "Give thanks for what is before you, for gratitude makes it more nourishing." He taught that food carries not only chemical value, but also vibration, and the state of mind in which we eat shapes how deeply it blesses us. To eat in haste, in worry, or in resentment, he warned, was to rob the body of healing. To eat calmly with prayer or simple gratitude was to invite the meal to serve as medicine. The connection between diet and emotion was inseparable for him. He explained that when the digestive system was strained, it clouded the mind, leading to irritability and even depression. Conversely, when meals were clean and balanced, clarity and calm often returned alongside relief from pain. Thus, each meal became a chance to support not just the body, but the harmony of the whole being. One of Cayce's most consistent recommendations was to maintain an alkaline-leaning diet, roughly 80% fruits and vegetables, 20% proteins and grains. He believed this balance created conditions in which inflammation could not thrive. Patients who adopted such diets often reported fewer flare-ups of arthritis, fewer headaches, and less muscular pain. Some wrote that their entire outlook shifted, that life felt less heavy, as though the weight of both body and spirit had been lightened. There is something profoundly empowering in this teaching. Instead of waiting for pain to strike and seeking only to silence it, one could take part in preventing it each day through the simple choices of the plate. The kitchen became a kind of apothecary, the garden a pharmacy, each meal a chance to either build harmony or sow discord. Cayce did not dismiss the pleasure of food. He encouraged enjoying meals, savoring flavors, but within the boundaries of balance. He taught that food should leave one feeling lighter, not weighed down. Those who followed his guidance often found that eating became more mindful, more intentional, and the rewards were not only fewer aches, but greater vitality. It is worth pausing to reflect on how modern science has since confirmed much of this wisdom. That anti-inflammatory diets rich in vegetables, healthy oils, and whole foods truly ease chronic pain and promote longevity. Cayce's guidance, born of trance in the early 1900s, echoes loudly in the nutrition research of today. As we imagine his patients rising from the table, nourished rather than burdened, we see clearly that diet was not only sustenance but medicine in its purest form. Pain, once a constant companion, often loosened its grip when the fire of inflammation was cooled from within. And yet Cayce knew that even the best diet, the most faithful remedies, would falter if the heart remained heavy. For pain was never only of the body. It often grew roots in the soil of unspoken grief, fear, and anger. Thus, his teachings led beyond herbs, oils, and meals into the hidden chambers of emotion, where balance must also be restored if true healing were to last. Edgar Cayce often reminded those who sought him out that pain does not always live only in the flesh. Yes, it takes form in the aching joints, the burning nerves, the tightness that grips the muscles. But beneath the surface, he said, lies another dimension, emotional burden stored within the body, speaking in the language of discomfort. To treat pain, one must tend not only to the tissues, but also to the hidden weight of the heart. He described the human being as a whole instrument, body and spirit vibrating together. When the emotional strings were pulled too tight by fear, resentment, or grief, the sound became discordant, and the body answered with pain. A stiff back could be the mark of long-held anger. Shoulders might bear years of unspoken responsibility, and headaches could rise from thoughts left unresolved. What is felt in the heart, Cayce once said, is etched upon the flesh. There was a woman who came to him after years of unexplained chest pain. Doctors found no fault in her heart, no weakness in her lungs, yet the ache lingered, sharp and frightening. In trance, Cayce revealed that her pain was rooted not in organ failure, but in grief unexpressed, grief from the loss of a child many years past. He told her gently to find ways of speaking her sorrow, to pray not only for relief but for release, and to allow herself to be held by loved ones. Alongside this, he advised simple massage and warm compresses. In the months that followed, the pain gradually faded, not only because her body eased, but because her heart was finally allowed to weep. This interplay of body and emotion was a theme that appeared in many of Cayce's readings. He knew that when emotions were bottled and carried unacknowledged, they hardened like sediment in a river, blocking the flow of life. Pain became both the warning and the weight. To restore balance, he urged people to forgive, to speak truth gently, to let go of resentments that bound them. These were not abstract moral teachings, but direct prescriptions for physical well-being. One man, racked by chronic back pain, confessed after his reading that he had lived years in silent bitterness toward his brother. Cayce instructed him to seek reconciliation, or at least to release the anger through prayer and acceptance. Though skeptical, the man tried. He wrote later that after releasing his resentment, he not only felt peace in his mind, but noticed his back pain lessen day by day. The relief was not sudden, but it grew steadily, as though the body no longer carried the burden of the grudge. Cayce often used the language of channels when speaking of the body. When love and forgiveness flowed freely, channels were open and health was supported. When fear and anger clogged those channels, the body cried out with symptoms. He did not deny the need for physical remedies, herbal poultices, castor oil packs, mineral baths, but he reminded patients that without inner release, the pain might always return. You cannot heal the flesh while the heart still festers, he warned gently. There was also the story of a teacher weighed down by relentless migraines. Her life was ordered, her diet clean, yet the headaches would not relent. In trance, Cayce explained that her strictness toward herself, her constant self-criticism, was the true spark of her pain. He urged her to practice kindness toward her own thoughts, to affirm her worth daily, and to allow joy into her life. Alongside massage with olive oil and rest, she began repeating simple affirmations. I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of health. Slowly, the headaches released their grip. She later said, it was not the oil alone. It was learning to speak gently to myself. Modern ears may find such teachings both surprising and deeply resonant. Today, we know that stress inflames the body, that trauma can lodge in tissues, that emotional release brings measurable physical relief. Cayce spoke of this long before science offered language for it. For him, the soul's state was never separate from the body's state. Healing required both to be heard. The beauty of this truth is that it restores dignity to the sufferer. Pain is not a punishment, nor is it merely random misfortune. It is often a message that something in life, an old grief, a hidden fear, a bitterness carried too long, wants to be released. And in releasing it, one not only feels lighter in spirit, but freer in body. He would often say, do not fight the pain, for in fighting you tighten it. Ask instead, what are you showing me? What may I let go? This shift in perspective transformed suffering into invitation. Patients, once feeling trapped, discovered agency. They could not always erase pain instantly, but they could respond with courage, honesty, and gentleness toward themselves. And often in that response, the body followed with relief. As we listen to Cayce's wisdom, we begin to see pain not as a solitary affliction, but as part of a dialogue between the inner and the outer. Herbs and oils soothe the body, but forgiveness, gratitude, and self-compassion soothe the heart. Only when both are tended can true balance be restored. And so, having walked through the inner chambers of emotion, we now return to the outer stories of those who lived this balance. Real men and women, once crippled by pain, found their way back to freedom by applying Cayce's remedies faithfully. Their journeys remind us that this wisdom is not only theory, but lived truth, stories that shine as lanterns on the path of healing. The power of Edgar Cayce's guidance does not live only in theory. It is found most vividly in the lives of those who followed it, men and women who came with pain and left with renewed hope. Their stories, carried down through letters, journals, and testimonies, remind us that healing is not an abstraction. It is flesh and blood. It is tears and relief. It is the joy of walking without wincing and of sleeping without waking in agony. In the lived experience of patients, Cayce's natural remedies became a doorway back to life itself. There was the farmer whose back had been bent with years of toil. For a decade, he could not stand straight without pain slicing across his spine. He came to Cayce not expecting miracles, only a sliver of comfort. The reading he received instructed him to apply castor oil packs to his lower back nightly, followed by gentle massage along the spine. It also urged him to adjust his meals lighter at night, with fresh vegetables and less meat. He followed diligently, almost ritualistically, not with eagerness, but with weary resignation. Yet slowly the pain began to lessen. Weeks passed, and one morning he realized he could straighten fully without the sharp pull. Months later, he wrote that he had returned to his fields not as a crippled man, but as a worker restored. His testimony closed with these words: "I had thought my back was my prison. Now it has become my strength again." There was also the young seamstress who endured crippling menstrual pain, days each month lost to cramps that left her pale and trembling. Doctors had given her little more than tonics to dull her senses. Cayce's reading pointed her to warm castor oil compresses over her abdomen, alternating with mineral salt baths, and most of all, to a softer diet with fresh fruits. She doubted, but she tried. Within 3 cycles, her pain diminished. Within 6, she said she could rise and sew through her days without collapse. She told friends that it was as though the oil and water had taught her body a new rhythm. Then there was the miner, weary and broken from decades underground. His joints ached, his breath was shallow, his nights haunted by spasms. Cayce prescribed weekly soaks in hot baths with Epsom salts, followed by massage and a few spoonfuls of olive oil in his diet. He later wrote that the baths seemed to draw out the weight not only from his muscles, but from his heart. For the first time in years, he slept through the night without waking from pain. He described the sensation as a heaviness leaving me, like stones dropping from my shoulders. One of the most moving accounts was from a woman suffering from migraines, so severe she often lay in dark rooms for days. Cayce's readings told her that her digestion was the true source, that her body was too acidic, her circulation sluggish. He urged her to eat simply, avoid fried and heavy foods, and to apply gentle massage with peanut oil along her neck and spine. At first, the headaches continued, but she persisted. Then, one afternoon, she realized she had gone 2 weeks without a single migraine. The relief was so profound she wept openly, writing later that, "I had forgotten what it felt like to live without pain." These stories, while varied in their detail, share the same thread: healing that begins not with suppression of symptoms, but with restoration of balance. Cayce's remedies called for patience. None promised instant relief. Yet those who committed discovered that their pain gradually dissolved, replaced by resilience and vitality. They did not only heal the body, they rediscovered the dignity of life, free from constant suffering. It is worth noting how often patients described a sense of peace that accompanied their relief. Castor oil packs lulled them into deep rest. Mineral baths seemed to wash not only the skin, but the mind. Massage released not only tight muscles, but also pent-up grief. Food chosen with care seemed to lighten not only inflammation, but the heaviness of thought. Pain receded, and in its place grew gratitude. This gratitude itself was part of the healing. Cayce said, "The mind builds what the body becomes." To hold gratitude while applying a poultice, to give thanks for the bath, to bless the meal before eating, these small acts infused remedies with greater potency. Patients often testified that they felt more alive, more connected to the divine presence within, as they practiced them. Pain had driven them to seek help, but in healing, they discovered something larger: the body as a sacred vessel, worthy of reverence. Perhaps this is why their testimonies still move us. They are not only stories of aches vanishing or joints loosening, they are stories of people learning to trust their bodies again, to live in harmony with nature's rhythms, to see themselves not as broken machines, but as living souls capable of renewal. And it is here that Cayce's wisdom grows even deeper. For beyond the relief of the physical body lies another lesson. Pain itself may hold spiritual meaning, calling us to growth, humility, and reconnection. To understand this dimension is to see suffering not as a curse, but as a teacher. A hard, unyielding teacher, but one that leads us toward greater wholeness. Edgar Cayce never denied the hardship of pain, nor did he romanticize it. He understood the sleepless nights, the fatigue that draped itself like a heavy cloak, the despair of waking each day to the same throb or ache. Yet in his readings, he often pointed to a deeper dimension. Pain could also serve as a signal not only of physical imbalance, but of spiritual opportunity. It was, in his words, the reminder that the soul still seeks harmony with its source. He explained that life is not only the dance of flesh and blood, but also the unfolding of the soul's journey. When imbalance occurs, whether through diet, emotions, or life choices, the soul calls attention to it, sometimes in the form of discomfort. Pain, then, was not only punishment, but an invitation. Consider it, Cayce once said, as a bell rung by the spirit, asking the self to look more closely at the life it is living. This perspective transformed how patients viewed their suffering. One man with chronic hip pain came to Cayce after years of failed treatments. In trance, Cayce revealed that the man's physical distress mirrored his spiritual stubbornness, his unwillingness to let go of anger toward his father. He advised forgiveness, prayer, and simple exercises to restore flexibility. The man later testified that when he began the work of releasing old resentment, his pain diminished. "I had thought it was only my body that was stiff," he confessed. "But it was my heart as well." Another case involved a woman plagued by recurring chest pains. Medical examinations found no disease, yet her suffering was real. Cayce explained that her spirit was weighed down by guilt from choices long past, and her body bore the echo. He urged her not only to use warm compresses and massages, but also to accept forgiveness for herself as much as for others. When she began this work, her chest eased, and with it, her sense of worth returned. In these stories, Cayce did not mean that pain was desirable. He never glorified it. Rather, he taught that even in suffering, meaning could be found. Pain could serve as a mirror, reflecting what the soul still yearned to heal. It was an unwelcome guest, yes, but one that sometimes carried hidden instructions. This approach reshaped the narrative of suffering. Instead of seeing pain only as random cruelty, patients could ask, "What lesson is hidden here? What part of my life calls for change?" For some, it was the call to release bitterness. For others, the call to slow down, to rest, to care for the body they had neglected. For still others, it was a summons to reconnect with the divine, to remember prayer, to cultivate faith. Cayce also linked pain to the soul's larger journey across lifetimes. He explained that sometimes the discomforts of today echoed unresolved patterns from past lives, offering another chance to transform them. A man crippled by leg pain, for instance, was told that in another life he had misused his strength to harm others, and in this life his soul sought balance by learning humility and compassion. Rather than despair, Cayce invited him to see his pain as a pathway to deeper understanding. This teaching could be difficult to accept, yet for many it provided solace. It meant that their suffering was not meaningless. Even if relief was slow, they could find purpose in their endurance, growth in their response, and faith in the soul's unfolding. Pain, though sharp, became the chisel shaping the spirit. Modern ears may find resonance here. Science now speaks of the link between mind and body, trauma and tissue, stress and illness. Cayce added another layer: the connection of soul and purpose. Healing was not only the removal of pain, but the discovery of meaning in it. One patient summarized it beautifully after months of following Cayce's remedies. The pain did not vanish overnight, but I am no longer its prisoner. It has taught me to forgive, to rest, to pray, and in that I feel more whole than before. Thus, the deeper spiritual dimension of pain is not to worship suffering, but to reframe it, to see it as a call toward balance, a teacher urging us to soften, to release, to reconnect with our source. In this way, every step of healing, whether by poultice, oil, massage, bath, or diet, becomes not only physical restoration, but spiritual renewal. And with this understanding, we arrive at the final stage of Cayce's wisdom, a vision of living pain-free, not by silencing the body, but by walking in balance with body, mind, and spirit aligned. A life where harmony itself becomes the medicine. To imagine a life without pains, not to imagine perfection, but to envision balance, a state where body, mind, and spirit move in harmony, where the signals of discomfort no longer need to cry out because the person listens before imbalance grows. This was the life Edgar Cayce believed was possible when his natural remedies were practiced not as isolated treatments, but as daily acts of care woven into a way of living. He urged patients to think not of healing as a single event, but as a rhythm, a lifestyle. Just as nature does not bloom in a single day but moves through seasons, so too does health emerge from consistent attention. A castor oil pack here, a mineral bath there, meals chosen with intention, emotions released instead of buried, gratitude spoken at the table, prayer whispered before sleep. These were the steady steps of a life lived in wholeness. Over time, the body learned trust again, and pain, once a constant visitor, became less frequent, less sharp, sometimes vanishing altogether. There was a story of an elderly carpenter who had lived with aching joints for decades. He followed Cayce's counsel faithfully. Daily stretches, massage with olive oil, weekly salt baths, lighter meals, and forgiveness practices for old grievances. His pain did not disappear overnight. Yet within months, he noticed his mornings were easier, his steps lighter. By the time a year had passed, he said he felt 20 years younger. "The pain became my teacher," he wrote, "and when I listened, it finally let me go." Living pain-free in Cayce's understanding was never about silencing the body with force. It was about learning its language and responding kindly. If the body asked for rest, give it rest. If it cried for cleaner food, feed it simply. If it ached under the weight of bitterness, let forgiveness lighten it. In doing so, one discovered that health was not a battle, but a partnership. Cayce's vision for humanity was not merely that individuals would find relief, but that they would rediscover their own capacity to heal. He often said, "The spirit is the life, the mind the builder, the physical the result." When spirit was aligned and the mind built wisely, the body naturally followed into harmony. Pain became less of an enemy and more of a guide, pointing toward imbalance, calling for correction, and then stepping aside when balance was restored. The most remarkable testimonies came not only from those who overcame pain, but from those who found joy in the process. They discovered that the journey itself, learning to prepare herbs, applying oils with intention, soaking in mineral baths with gratitude, Choosing lighter foods, releasing heavy emotions, was as healing as the relief itself. These small rituals reminded them daily that their bodies were sacred, worthy of care, and capable of renewal. And perhaps that is Cayce's greatest legacy, the reminder that we are not powerless in the face of suffering. We are participants, co-creators in our healing. The earth offers her plants, her oils, her salts. The body offers its signals, its resilience. The spirit offers guidance, forgiveness, and hope. When all three are honored together, healing becomes not an accident, but a natural unfolding. So we come to the close of this journey through Cayce's teachings on natural pain relief. Yet it does not end here, for the remedies live on wherever warm hands apply oil, wherever herbs are steeped into poultices, wherever a meal is chosen with thoughtfulness, wherever forgiveness softens the heart. Pain will still appear in the world. It is part of life's language. But we now know it can be met with gentleness, wisdom, and trust in the body's capacity to heal. As the sun lowers over the horizon and the day releases its hold, we are left with the quiet truth of Edgar Cayce's message. Pain is not only a burden, but a signal, a teacher, an invitation. It reminds us of what is out of balance and calls us back to harmony. When we meet it with fear, we tighten its grip. When we meet it with respect, we begin to understand its lessons. Cayce's remedies, herbal poultices, castor oil packs, massage, mineral baths, balanced diets, and emotional release are not ancient relics. They remain as relevant today as when he first spoke them. They remind us that healing often comes not from what is newest or most advanced, but from what is simple, humble, and natural. The earth has always provided what we need. The body has always known how to restore itself, if only we give it the chance. This is not to say that pain disappears entirely, or that suffering is an illusion. It is real, and at times it is heavy. But within it lies possibility. Each ache can lead us to examine how we live, how we eat, how we love, how we forgive. In this way, pain can become the beginning of transformation rather than the end of hope. Cayce taught that no single remedy works in isolation. A poultice may soothe, but without cleaner foods, pain may return. A massage may release, but without forgiveness, the tension may remain. Healing is the weaving of all parts of life, physical, mental, and spiritual, into a tapestry of balance. For those listening now, perhaps carrying pain in their back or knees or heart, let this be a reminder. Relief is possible. The tools are near at hand, and the body longs to heal. Try a warm compress. Soak in a mineral bath. Eat with intention. Breathe forgiveness. Rest deeply. These are not acts of desperation, but of dignity. They honor the sacredness of the body, the wisdom of nature, and the spark of the divine within. As we close, imagine the scene. An evening breeze moves through an open window, carrying the scent of herbs steeped in hot water. A cloth, warm with castor oil, rests gently upon an aching limb. The breath slows. The heart softens, the pain loosens. In that moment, body and spirit are no longer at odds. They are partners once again. This is the gift Edgar Cayce left us. Not a promise of a life without challenge, but a pathway to meet those challenges with grace, wisdom, and natural remedies that honor both earth and soul. Pain will visit, but so will healing. And with patience, with care, with balance, the body will remember what it was always meant to know. That harmony is its true home.